are you guys doing today? I hope you're all doing very, very good. It's nice to see all of your in my head canon faces. Looking handsome and beautiful and sharp. All of you are looking all of those things in my head canon. I don't have a lot to really say. Besides, let's get some fucking progress on this ghost, hey? I put my keyboard on top of it, so it's like flat right now, which is wild. I don't know why that is fucking crazy to me, but it is crazy to me. Maybe because I got a little bit high. Maybe that's why. It just looked crazy, okay? It looked crazy while it was flat. We were on row 21. If I could get just 3 readies, we can pop this shit off, fam. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I just thought of something. That I want to talk about, actually. I'm so sorry. You guys, I stumbled upon a bunch of people hating on Anissa. Like Idub's wife. And it was some of the most sexist, crazy shit I have ever seen. Can I just say that women tearing other women down, it just makes you look like a pick-me. It just makes you look like a pick-me. It makes you look so insecure and so fucking evil. There's no reason to hate on her. It's so fucking weird. It's so parasocial. This whole, like, Kiwi Farms lolcow shit, I can't hang. It is wild to me. And watch it, like, I don't know. I see the stuff that she says. I feel like people nitpick about her, like, ancient history, and it is fucking bonkers to me. Don't fucking hate on other women. Like, find something better to do, maybe. Maybe do that. Maybe, I don't know, like, talk about your morals and values without the need to tear anybody else down. I don't know. I'm not anywhere near as big as these accounts that have made a career off of fucking hating on iDubbbz's wife. But knock that shit off. Like, who do you think you fucking are? Who do you think you are? You actual piece of trash. That is wild to me. It made me so upset. I'm sorry. I just had to say that. Okay, now if I could just get 3 readies, we can go ahead and do true crime. I just had to get it off my chest. It really bummed me out. The internet's a bad place and we should burn it down. Okay, all right, here we go. Sorry, I apologize. I'm not sorry for what I think. I'm not sorry for my opinion on that. But wow, I am sorry for the rant. I act like your readies are never ending. I'm sorry. I really shouldn't have taken that hit of weed. I thought it would wear off by now. Your readies are never ending. Motherfucker, sacrifice them to me. To me. Give me them. Wasting a ready like they grow on trees. They do. They're infinite. Readies are infinite. It's an infinite source of true crime and crochet. All right, give me real readies, boys. Let's do this. Please and thank you. It helps me. It helps me when you give me real readies. I'm counting that, J-Rod, you smart ass. I'm counting it. I have Hacks Matt. I have J-Rod. Just give me one more. I just almost stuffed this straw down my throat. The yarn needle, hello and welcome. I'm making, this is my first amigurumi ever. My first real amigurumi ever. Like, I've made like little cat toys and stuff that I just kind of freehanded. This, I'm putting 2 patterns together, and it's my first real amigurumi. It's a ghost bear. It's wild. It's wild. I'm being wild. But we're gonna figure it the fuck out. Hot mess or no? All right, we've got readies. Let's fucking do this. Hell yeah. Okay. I shouldn't get excited over a missing little girl. Oh no. I'm sorry. That's not the way that I meant that. Please don't take it that way. I'm overthinking everything.
Sandra Renee Cantu was born March 8th, 2001. From the moment she was born, Sandra was outgoing and friendly, always engaging with everyone she could, and crying the moment she was left alone. She was one of the rare people who truly seemed to thrive when others were around. And growing up in a small trailer with her mother, Maria, 3 other siblings, and their grandparents, she would be around people more often than not. The family resided in Tracy, California, a short drive away from the San Francisco
You responded
Bay
to me
area.
on Discord.
Much
I'm
like
so sorry. I
many of the
haven't looked at
people in the
Discord in
Bay,
like a
the
week.
family
I will
struggled to keep up
check
with the
it.
rising cost of living. Maria did what she could to support
Oh,
the
for
family,
the thing.
and living with her parents helped ease some
That's
of the
awesome.
financial burden.
Thank
But
you.
after Sandra's father left the family, Maria was left scrambling to take care of their 3 children. Despite the family's financial struggles, Sandra was described as always being happy and outgoing. She loved singing and dancing, and would put on entire performances for anyone who would watch. She
Y'all,
especially
are these
enjoyed
single
playing with her
crochets
friends around the
or
neighborhood.
hay
She made new
doubles?
friends incredibly easy. The family resided in Orchard Estates Mobile Home Park, which served as a small and tight-knit community for the family. Everyone knew
They're
everyone
single
else,
crochets. Okay,
and there
we're
was a
good.
sense of underlying trust between them, especially with how many small children
Hi.
resided in the park. Sandra and the rest of the kids her age that resided in the trailer park were all extremely close, constantly going between each other's small homes to hang out and play whenever they could. Sandra herself was known for going door to door in the community when she was bored, always looking for something to do and someone to talk to. She was friends with
sweet
every
little
kid in the
baby.
area, and
Oh,
every
you're
day
sick?
after
Oh, no.
school,
I hope you get
she would
better
go out and play
soon.
with her friends.
I'm sorry you're not
Maria
feeling
did
good.
have one rule for Sandra and her siblings, though, and that was if they were to go out and play with their friends, they couldn't leave the trailer park. Unfortunately, unbeknownst to families living inside
Oh
of
my
the park,
skulls.
a
Thank you so
monster
much for
was
the
living
raid. I
amongst them.
appreciate it so
Welcome
much.
back
How
to
are
another
you?
Episode of Dreading, or if this is your first time here, welcome. Today we are going to be covering the case of Sandra Cantu.
Hold on, I'll pause
and
the
how a
video and I'll talk a
28-year-old
little
Sunday
bit.
school teacher
Hey,
did the
hey, thank you so
unimaginable
much
to
for the
her.
raid.
This
Are
case
you
came highly
likewise a
recommended from multiple-
crafter for your community? My name is Zero Doxy. People just call me Doxy. I do creepy crochet is what we call it, where we watch something creepy only with the express permission of the content creators, and we crochet stuff. And this is my first foray into amigurumi, and it's like a mishmash of 2 patterns. Nice. Yeah, that's pretty much the long and the short of it. I'm a piece of shit garbage human being. Welcome to my chat. Thank you so much. Oh my God, Rain, thank you. I'm not gonna lie to you. I wasn't gonna tell you. I was so embarrassed about this. I don't know if I didn't wash my face or my brushes well enough, but my makeup has this disgusting texture on my forehead, and like I just feel like everybody can see it. So, thanks. We were just playing Cult of the Lamb. Fun. That is a great game. What else was I gonna say? I was gonna, I guess, ask about you, but if you have to get out of here, I understand the raid and run. I do it every fucking time, so don't feel obligated to stick around, but of course you are welcome to hang out. Right now we're watching Dreading, Crime and Psychology on YouTube. Super cool dude. If you just do exclamation point feature or tilde feature, either of those in chat, you'll get a link to his channel. I built up a tiny queue of videos that we're going to do. And it's just true crime stuff. I would love if you guys would give him the extra view, though. He's a super, super trill dude. If true crime is your thing, I don't always agree with all of his takes, but I respect him and I like everything that he has to say. I think that he does justice to the victims. Gonna go grab some food? Okay, enjoy. Thank you so much for the raid. Appreciate you. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get this going again. Welcome, all of the raiders.
Full of my patrons over on Patreon, which is the platform I use to ensure that I can pursue this career with a financial safety net, as YouTube often demonetizes my videos. After a number of tests, I have found that even putting my channel name in the title of the video will result in the video being struck. So I appreciate my patrons for making sure that I can continue to do this full time, regardless of YouTube's decisions. To be clear, even if one of my videos was struck and I couldn't make money on this
You have
platform, I
COVID?
still would
No,
create
I'm so
content.
sorry.
Patreon
Is it the
just
worst?
ensures that I can dedicate more time to this. If you are interested
How
in
are you holding
supporting
up?
this channel, my Patreon is linked below. But with that out of the way, let us begin. Sandra came home from playing at a friend's house after school at 4 p.m. She dropped off her school bags and then decided that she, like she had so many times
I need
before,
to count.
would go back
So
outside
sorry.
to play. She told her family
1,
that she was
2,
going
3,
outside,
4,
and they reminded
5,
her
6,
to be home by dinner,
7,
and
8.
she left, skipping down the road
I'm
to
so
see
sorry,
if any of
Zombie
her friends
Broccoli.
were
That's the
around.
worst.
Around 7 p.m., Maria began to call around to Sandra's friends in the neighborhood, asking if they could send her daughter home for dinner. It was beginning to get dark, and she thought that the 8-year-old had simply lost track of time. However, every house she called said the same thing. Sandra hadn't come over that day, and they hadn't seen her at all. After calling everyone in the park and seeing if they knew where her daughter was, Maria began to get nervous.
Slug
She
life
didn't
is the
think
best part
anything
of
was amiss,
life.
per se, but she knew that it wasn't like Sandra to
Like,
go
don't get me wrong, I
unnoticed.
love
Even if
being
she was
active, but
playing
I
on her own
love
outside,
being
She
lazy.
was loud and boisterous, and she would have gone to every door in the park before deciding to be on her own. Still, Maria taught her daughter well, and she knew she was likely still within the trailer park.
Can you guys see
So she
everything
set
and
out
hear
on her
everything
own,
okay? Do I
looking
need to
for
turn this
Sandra.
up or
She
anything?
called out to Sandra while making her way through the small mobile home park and found no sign of her daughter. After she searched the entire park herself, she realized that it had been nearly 4 hours since the last time anyone had stated they had seen the 8-year-old, and she quickly called the police and reported her missing. In cases like these, the police response time is usually suspect,
Excellent.
and the case is given little attention. However, the Tracy police immediately responded and started a large-scale search for the missing girl. They went door to door in the mobile home park and talked to everyone in the area, looking for any sign of the girl, and almost instantly, they found a break. The neighbor who lived across the street from Sandra's home had recently put up a surveillance camera, and after checking back on the footage, they caught Sandra leaving her home at 4 p.m., exactly as her mother said. The footage showed the girl skipping away, clearly in good spirits, and showed exactly what she was wearing at the time of her disappearance, which was vital information. She was wearing a Hello Kitty shirt and black leggings, and the last known images of her were quickly circulated through the media, but it led to a dead end. It seemed that no one in the area had seen Sandra that day, but, seemingly unrelated to Sandra's disappearance, one of their neighbors, 28-year-old Melissa Huckabee, informed the family that her home had been burglarized the same day at 4 p.m. When Maria had contacted the police and the search had begun for Sandra, Melissa texted her, writing, "Tell the police that I had something stolen today around 4 p.m. I don't know if that makes a difference or not." The likelihood of two completely unrelated crimes occurring in the same mobile home park at the same time were extremely low, so the police briefly talked to Melissa to see what had happened. Melissa informed the police that she had left an Eddie Bauer suitcase on her driveway, which was just a couple of doors down from the Cantu residence. However, at 4 p.m., around the same time that Sandra had last been seen, the bag was taken. She insisted to the police that she didn't want the investigation into what happened to her bag to supersede the investigation into where Sandra was, but she felt she had to come forward because it could be related. For the most part, the police brushed off Melissa's statements and her missing luggage as being entirely unrelated to the case at hand. The Tracy Police Department wasted
My
no
arms
time
are going
and
all
spared no
numb.
expense in their search for Sandra,
I don't know
bringing
why.
in multiple of county search teams and other units to help find the 8-year-old girl. Over the course of the weekend, dogs, equestrian teams, ATVs, and a helicopter from the California Highway Patrol were brought in. and dive teams
All
who
right,
searched the river
so
miles
now we're
away from
supposed to
her
do
home. As the search
increases.
continued, the police spoke to Maria about the family's living situation, and when they heard that she was in the process of divorcing and arranging the custody agreement between Sandra's
I
father,
think I want to
they
do
set
one
their
more
sights
switch
on
back
Daniel
here,
Cantu.
though.
The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children estimates that approximately 200,000
So I'm gonna.
of the 260,000 children abducted each year are taken by a parent or other family member, and it only made logical sense for him to become their prime suspect. But Maria and the rest of the family rejected that line of thinking outright. Sandra hadn't spoken to or seen her father in years, and though the couple was divorcing, Maria knew Daniel would never hurt a hair on his daughter's head. He was quickly ruled out as a suspect, given that he was nowhere near Tracy when Sandra went missing, and the case was at a standstill. The Tracy Police Department was small and didn't want their lack of experience leading to the girl's demise, so they contacted the FBI, hoping to get a basic profile of person or persons who might have taken Sandra. The profile that the FBI returned was that of a white male aged between 25 and 40 with a criminal history of sexual assault or child pornography. Shortly after receiving this profile, Sandra's aunt, Angie Chavez, spoke up about
I hate
an
everything
inappropriate
about this
encounter
so far.
that had occurred years prior.
Poor baby.
According to Angie, in the summer of 2007, Sandra had been inappropriately
Oh,
touched
hi,
by
babe.
an older man at the community pool. She stated that my mother-in-law saw him march over, sweep her hair off her face, and give her a kiss on the lips. He had been confronted about the encounter at the time, and said it was nothing more than a neighborly interaction. But now that Sandra was missing, the police felt they needed to take a closer look. The man, who was now in his 60s, still lived within the mobile home park near Sandra, and had been interviewed the night she went missing. But with this added information, he was questioned once more. But eventually, they were able to rule him out entirely, and stated that he was, quote, harmless, despite having kissed a 6-year-old on the mouth. The neighbors also made mention of an ice cream man who had been seen in the area that day that they had never seen before. He had been seen earlier that day, talking with some of the neighborhood children and selling
I need
them
to undo
treats.
this
But the
whole
fact that he had
switchback
never
that I
been
just
seen there
did.
before stood out to the community as strange. But later on, he too would be ruled out. The community had come together to support Sandra and her family during this time. Initially, a $2,000 reward had been put up for any information involving the case that could lead to its closure. But as more people heard about the case and saw Sandra's small face on the news,
I'll do you one better, J-Rod. I'm frogging 12.
To the cause. Businesses and charities raised money to support bringing Sandra home, and multiple candlelight vigils were held in her honor. It was at one of these vigils, once again, Melissa Huckabee approached the police. She was sobbing hysterically and was nearly hyperventilating when she approached the officers.
Oh, I shouldn't have done that.
Telling them that she had found a note on the ground. The note was nearly illegible, with multiple misspellings scattered throughout, but it read, Cantu, locked and stolen suitcase, thrown in water on Bichetti Road and Whitehall Road. Witness. It was obvious that whoever wrote the note wanted it to appear that they were unintelligent and could barely spell, not realizing that misspelling the word on while correctly spelling the word Bichetti was unbelievable under any circumstances. Huckabee was
they were
inconsolable when she
unintelligent.
presented the note. However, after they read it, she calmed down completely. Special Agent Michael Conrad would describe the encounter as being incredibly strange and eerie. Her continued insistence that her stolen luggage played some role in the seemingly unrelated kidnapping, and her somehow finding a note on the ground that said as much, led investigators to believe that she was trying to insert herself into the investigation for attention and validation. The FBI
Seems to me like
had seen this
we know
time and time
what
before, with many
kind
people
of
submitting
container to
false
look
tips
for
and lying
a little
about
girl
witnessing
stuffed
crimes for
into.
attention. But still, they needed to
Nice.
cover their bases.
You
so
absolute
they sent the letter in for
goblin.
testing. They also sent a search team to the area.
You guys are really
indicated
good
on
at
the
making
note,
me say
but
that
found
at the
nothing,
worst
given that the
times.
majority of the irrigation ponds
Is
were
this a
filled
game
with
to
cow
you,
manure.
chat?
Melissa had also been forthcoming with the police when they had originally spoken to them about what she had done on the 27th. Melissa said that she had been decorating her classroom at the church. She told the police that she made a phone call about a stolen suitcase while she was there. When her phone records were obtained, it validated her story, and it seemed, at least for the time being, that she just wanted to feel like she was a part of a nationwide investigation. It wouldn't be until April 6, 2009, nearly 2 weeks after Sandra had gone missing, that she would be found. Farm workers in the area were draining an irrigation pond when they happened to find an Eddie Bauer suitcase. Thinking that it had been dumped there, they retrieved the suitcase and found
This is gonna be
Sandra's
tough
small
because
body inside.
it's just slip
The
stitches that I'm
police
working
quickly
into. Hi,
arrived at the
Kool-Aid.
scene, and Sandra was properly ID'd. Shortly after, during her
It's okay.
autopsy, it was found
Goblin,
that the
that
8-year-old
actually
had been
is a
drugged
game to my
prior
chat. They
her
like to
death.
try to make
She had
me
ingested
say it nice at the
alprazolam
worst
before she was
possible
beaten,
times.
sexually
That
abused
it's
with a
so
foreign
super
object,
fine. No
then
worries.
smothered to
We
death.
have a
And,
dark
as
sense
you
of
would
humor
probably
around here because you
deduce,
kind of
the
have
bag she
to.
was found in
Meaty,
just so happened to
hi, how
belong
are
to Melissa
you?
Huckabee.
Tonight, the police chief tells us that the person or the persons responsible for the death of 8-year-old Sandra Cantu will be brought to justice. Now, Sandra Cantu's body was found inside a black suitcase that was located at the irrigation pond by farm workers this morning off of Machete Road. Now, police then took that luggage from the pond and transported the bag to the county morgue, where this evening police identified the body of Sandra Cantu. Now, right now, police cannot tell us the exact cause of death, but
This is so
investigators
hard.
tell us Sandra was identified
Glad
by
to
the
see you
clothing she
too.
was wearing. Now, investigators say the area where Sandra's body was found, search crews did in fact comb through that area. Now, we're told the irrigation pond was filled 2 weeks ago, and authorities believe the luggage floated to the surface. Sandra's body was only 2 miles away from her home. News of Sandra's death has devastated a number of people in the community.
Right, Sperry? Yeah, I always know how it's gonna end, but there's a hope there.
In the worst way. Did you know Sandra or the family in any way?
No, but it feels like you do because, just like you kind of feel everybody else's pain.
And our heartfelt sympathies go out to Sandra's family, her friends, and her classmates. From this point forward, investigators will be looking at all of the evidence that was collected today and the evidence that and information that we have collected prior in the prior days regarding this investigation. We will be determining the person or persons responsible for this reprehensible act, and we will bring them to justice.
10.
And tonight, investigators tell us this is now a homicide investigation. We're told an
11.
autopsy on Sandra Cantu's body will be performed tomorrow. No word on how long that autopsy will take, but again, of course, investigators now say this turns into a homicide investigation. For now, we're live in Tracy. Damani Lewis, KCRA.
And then just so that it looks nice, we'll do
Prior to this
slip
point,
stitch.
police had written Melissa
turn.
off as an attention-seeking but ultimately well-meaning person. Melissa had previously worked as an event planner and studied criminology in community college. When she moved back to Tracy to help her parents, she became a Sunday school teacher. Although some people found her to be a bit strange, very few people, however, knew her at all. Connie Lawless, Melissa's grandmother, would describe her as being a loner who suffered from severe depression and mood swings.
I definitely am.
Melissa
I'm
had a
past
history
it,
of
Kool-Aid.
self-harm as
Thank you
well,
for the
choosing
support.
to cut herself on her ankles in her youth. She was diagnosed bipolar and schizophrenic, and often kept a cocktail of drugs on her at all times, which included benzodiazepine, also known as Xanax, Adderall, paroxetine, and furosemide. Oftentimes, she would take the medications when she didn't
Oh,
need
that
them,
okay.
claiming that they were for
I was
other
like,
things, and making
those
up
are not
stories
the
as to
same
why she had
thing.
to take them at all.
Is it going to have a
On
filling?
at
It
least
is,
2
yeah.
occasions, Melissa had been accused of drugging others using her medication. In January of 2009, 2 months prior to Sandra going missing, one of the other Cantu's neighbors had accused Melissa of drugging her child. She stated that the girl had come home and was clearly not in her right mind. She could barely stand straight and was having a hard time recalling where she was or what she had done. Her mother took her to the hospital, and she was found to have benzodiazepine in her blood. She contacted the police, and when questioned on the subject, she stated that
Just
nothing had
chocolate.
happened while the girl was under her care. She was also quick to bring up that the mother had previously done drugs, and that it was much more likely that she had drugged her daughter herself. As the girl who had been drugged had no memory as to what happened, the case was dropped entirely. She also allegedly drugged her ex-boyfriend, Daniel Plowman. Daniel and Melissa had been dating for a while when she told him that she was pregnant with his child. He immediately proposed to her, and the pair set out to get married. However, before the wedding was to take place,
Ooh,
she
that's a
gave him
scary
drink
photo
that
of
tasted
her.
funny. He had it and then completely blacked out, waking up in a jail cell the next morning for public intoxication. Many people have also speculated that Melissa dealt with Munchausen syndrome, and later,
I mean, it very sounds like it. Yeah. Sounds like that.
was
Yeah.
the type of person who constantly needed
We do
attention
English.
and would do anything
We say
to get
words.
it. Growing up, she would often feign injuries.
Some people work
telling
hard on their
people she'd
makeup to
broken
look
her
like
leg
that.
by falling
No,
out
I
of
just
a
mean
tree
like she
despite walking just fine.
the
She told friends she
like
had cancer and other
emotionlessness of it.
life-threatening
I don't.
illnesses
She's. I
multiple
think that
times
she's a
over.
really pretty
In
girl,
multiple
actually.
instances, told her
Those lips
boyfriend
are
that she was pregnant with
perfection.
her child when she wasn't. When her lies and stories would catch up with her, she would make elaborate tales to justify her actions. But usually, after a year or so, most people would catch on to her lies and stop talking to her outright. She also had an unhealthy habit of labeling those closest to her as
Give me 1 second. I have to
abusive
pull this
whenever it
close to
suited
me
her. On
and
one occasion,
count,
Melissa
and I
accused
have
an
to like look
ex-boyfriend
really
who had
close. So
broken
give
up
me
with
1
her
second. So
of
sorry.
stalking her, threatening to harm her grandpa, and threatening to kill her. She took out a restraining order on him. However, it was later dropped when the police found there was no evidence of wrongdoing on his part. He would go on to claim that he wanted nothing to do with her, and she told him that she would ruin his life. She would later go on to accuse her ex-husband of child abduction and domestic violence, stating that he was an unfit parent.
And we sat down with Johnny Huckabee for an interview. The pair divorced in 2005, but he gave GMA a rare and exclusive look into the Melissa he knew and once loved. What was your reaction when you heard that Melissa was accused of this type of violence?
My initial reaction was shock and complete disbelief, because I mean, it's not something you want to think anybody possible of doing, let alone somebody that you knew and that's a mother of your child.
Well, you were married, but you were young, right? And this was a typical young marriage that ended quickly.
Correct.
How long were you together?
Officially together probably a little bit over a year.
How would you describe her personality? How would you describe her to somebody?
This is so
A
tough.
carefree person. Somebody that I
Working
really
this
could
the way
not
that I am
see,
to make it so there's no
doing
holes when
something
I
like
do these
this.
switchbacks
Do you believe
makes
that
some
she
of these
struggled with
stitches
emotional
incredibly
issues?
tight, and I have to get back
I
through
do
them.
believe that the
Smash or
emotional
pass
issues,
prison intake photo
came
edition.
into play quite often in her lifetime.
What kind of emotional issues?
She did suffer from depression. She did have issues with her self persona, who she saw herself as.
Did she ever receive treatment, as far as you know?
As far as I know that I could positively say, no. But she was on medication that was prescribed, so I imagine at some point in time she did see somebody for the problems.
Was she ever violent? Did she ever hurt anybody? Did she ever talk about hurting people? Anything that gives an indication of what
Agree,
we're now
Meaty.
hearing about?
I think that he's
No,
lying.
No, she had never, not to anybody else that I've known. No.
Is there any way that this could have been an intentional situation, from what you know of Melissa?
From what I know of her, no, I don't see this being any type of intentional situation.
What's been your best sense of what Melissa's life has been like since you two separated in 2003?
Well,
Hi,
from what
Keekstar.
I understand,
That's what I'm going to start calling my cat, Kika.
She went to school.
Welcome.
She got a job.
Everybody
She's
make sure that
making
Keekstar feels welcome.
Fairly good money, and she had a pretty good life going. The last I'd heard.
10.
What's your sense of what kind of mom Melissa has been to your daughter?
As far as I'm concerned, as much as I know,
Wait, is that true?
She was a good mom to her.
When you saw the images of Melissa, the
3,
pictures,
4,
the video of her
6,
in her
7,
prison
8,
garb,
9,
her
10,
face,
11.
her
What?
reactions, do you recognize that person?
12,
No.
13,
How's she different?
14.
The way she walked out there was not the person that I knew.
17, 18,
It was
19, 20.
looks like she
21,
was a
22,
person in somebody else's
23,
body.
24.
You're
Okay,
holding out hope that
I'm
this
on
is not
track.
true?
I don't understand how
the
I got
mother
so
of your
confused
daughters?
on that, but
Of course, and
I did.
I wouldn't wish this on anybody, especially on the family members of the victim,
Wow.
but mainly for my daughter. I mean, I do not want my daughter growing up with that type of legacy to look forward to.
Where's your daughter now?
14.
She's in a safe place.
And what is your understanding of how
Again,
your
I'm going to
daughter's
have to
doing?
wheedle this one
She's
in
doing,
here,
very
so
well right now.
sorry.
She does
What am I
not
crocheting?
have
I'm
any
making
knowledge of the situation that's
a
going
little
on,
plushie
which
for
is
my
best.
friend. Thank
All
you
right,
so
John,
much for the
thank you.
follow.
I know this is a very difficult situation. I'm glad to
For
hear
a friend
that
of
your
mine
daughter's
that is
unaware
also a
and that
streamer
she's
named
safe,
Bear
and I wish
Taffy,
you
but
the
it's a
best with
secret,
her.
so you can't tell him.
Okay, thank you.
It is a ghost
Those
and
who
a
spent
bear.
Any amount of time around her simply just
Condom.
wrote
It's
her
not a
behaviors
condom.
off as
This would be
being
the least
attention-seeking
effective
and
condom of all
obnoxious,
time.
but they doubted
Like,
that
you might
she
as
would
well
ever
just
really
not
do
wear
anything to
one.
hurt anyone else, although nothing could be further
This is
from
not
the
only
truth.
gonna not
2 days
stop
prior to Sandra's body being found,
pregnancy or
Melissa checked
STDs,
herself
it's
into
also gonna
Sutter
just
Tracy
like straight up
Community
give you
Hospital, claiming that she had
infections.
accidentally swallowed an X-Acto knife blade while sleepwalking the
God
night
damn it, I have to
before.
count again.
There
I'm so
currently
sorry,
exists
everybody.
No proof that this claim is real or that she ever sleepwalked at all, but the hospital wanted to keep her under surveillance nonetheless. When the news broke that the 8-year-old girl had been found, Melissa excitedly texted her grandparents saying they're having an 8:15 news briefing on the suitcase. That was fast. I hope they didn't find anything. She was excited about the update, specifically that it led back in some way to her luggage. It was her suitcase, and it had been where the note that she had found said it would be. She couldn't care less that Sandra had perished in a horrendous way. Later on, she texted her grandmother once more, stating, "I hope she wasn't sexually assaulted," which, as we know, she was. From the moment Sandra was found in the suitcase, the police narrowed its investigation entirely. Before, Melissa's insistence
Good
that her
golly,
bag had
okay.
something to do with the case was nothing if not annoying. The obviously fake
If it felt
note was a
uncomfortable
sign of
enough on your
someone who
penis, it could prevent
desperately wanted to be
ejaculation.
involved, not the
True,
killer trying
but
to
no
point away from
guarantees.
themselves. However, they now took notice of the unusual fact that a woman who reported losing a suitcase should be the one woman out of everyone in this complex who should happen to find a note that reports that the stolen suitcase was used to hide the child's body. In a press conference given that day, Tracy Police Sergeant Tony Sheenman told the media that it's not as big of a mystery as it was before, and we believe we're getting significantly closer.
Confusion
We're
alone might
hopeful
end the
we will have
interaction
something
entirely.
in the next couple of
True.
days.
Just like,
While Melissa was in the
I'm
hospital,
happy to
she
see
was
you.
placed under police surveillance. She believed this was done because she was vitally important to closing the case, not because she was a suspect, and excitedly told those around her what was going on, not seeming to understand that being excited about a girl's murder was inappropriate. At the same time, the police executed a search warrant on the home she shared with her grandparents and seized her Kia Sportage. Inside the car, they found a post-it note that had
Sportage.
been written on, but all the words had been scribbled
it.
out in an attempt to make the words illegible. Immediately, the post-it note was sent in for testing, and it proved that the words Pachetti Road, Whitehall Road, and Water
Also,
had all
hi,
been
Quinn,
written
welcome,
on it
how are
before
you?
they had been crossed out furiously. When they searched Melissa's home, they also found a notebook under Melissa's bedroom dresser. The notebook contained the same paper
Okay,
as
let's
the
go
original
around
letter she
once
gave
just
to the
to
police, and there
smooth
was
out
one
this row.
singular page ripped out of it. Not only that, but there was enough of an
I have to
impression on the page
very
behind the
concentrate on
one that had been
counting these.
removed, and it was
So
clear
not
to
looking
see
at
that
chat
the
until
note
I'm
she had
through
given
with this
them
row. I
came from the
apologize.
notebook. This confirmed what they already knew. Melissa had written the note about Sandra's killing.
If you were
and
gonna
she was
riot,
most
now's the
definitely
time, 'cause
person
I can't
behind
do
it.
nothing about
The
it 'cause I
police
can't
got another
look.
lead when a retired U.S. Marine and his wife notified them they had spotted Huckabee and her SUV at the irrigation pond on their property at Pachetti Road and Whitehall Road between 5:30 p.m. and 6 p.m. on March 27th, the same day that Sandra had gone missing. They reportedly recognized Huckabee on television and described her as distracted and hurried when they saw her at the pond. 3 days after Sandra's body was found, Melissa left the hospital. She contacted the police, who had asked her to come in for another round of questioning. When she came in the next day, her lies would completely fall apart. For 3 hours, the detectives described their evidence to the 28-year-old woman, and she immediately broke down and confessed, although she attempted to portray what had occurred as nothing more than a tragic accident. According to the court documents regarding the case, Huckabee told investigators she was trying to play hide-and-seek with Sandra and suggested she get in the suitcase and jump out to scare Huckabee's daughter, who was Sandra's close friend. According to her story, Sandra agreed, so she zipped up the suitcase with the girl inside. Somehow, though, she immediately forgot the girl was in it. Melissa stated that after putting the girl inside the suitcase, she then loaded it into the car and drove to the church she worked at. When she arrived and brought the suitcase into her classroom, she then remembered that the little girl was inside of it. She unzipped the case and found Sandra dead. Huckabee said she immediately tried to do CPR on the girl and was overwhelmed with guilt for forgetting her in the bag. She went further to claim that she took a small towel, wet it, and placed it on her forehead to cool the girl off and hoped that the water would help resuscitate her. Huckabee said she freaked out and didn't know what to do. Her head was spinning out of control and she was not thinking straight, according to the report. But after a bit, she decided that the best course of action would be to put Sandra's body back into the suitcase and dump it in the irrigation pond. This goes entirely against autopsy, which found that Sandra had been drugged, beaten, sexually assaulted with a foreign object, and then finally smothered. It's clear that Melissa was lying. After her confession, the police got a search warrant for the church. In a kitchen drawer in the back, investigators found a metal rolling pin that had a bent handle and a red-brown smudge. Church members used the rolling pin to make unleavened bread for the Lord's Supper. It would test positive for Sandra's DNA.
How are you?
And it was likely
Hi,
the
Bungie.
object Melissa used to both beat
What's for
Sandra
dinner? I'm
and
cooking up some
sexually assault her.
cream and
Melissa
mushroom and
was
broccoli
arrested
soup with
the
fresh
same
broccoli,
day,
mushrooms,
but
onion,
still,
and garlic.
the police
That sounds
were not finished with their
amazing.
investigation. After her arrest, the
We're
police
doing
seized her
chili.
electronics,
I'm gonna serve
only
it
to
over
find that the
rice
attack
because
had
all
been
I want in
entirely
life is a
premeditated.
carb.
Melissa had searched on multiple different occasions how to kill a child, and she looked up a specific case in which a father killed their child and hid their body in a suitcase. The police and prosecution were able to put
Jesus.
together the timeline of events that had been carried out by Melissa that day, and it seemed, at the very least, she tried to do this one time before. When Sandra went outside to look for someone to play with, Melissa lured her over to her home and asked her if she could help decorate her classroom with her. Sandra agreed because she trusted Melissa. She was her close friend's mom, and she believed that Melissa would never do anything to hurt her. Melissa put Sandra in the car, along with the suitcase, and together they drove to the church.
Hi, James. How are
when
you?
They arrived at the church, Melissa made Sandra
Good
a
to
drink
see you.
laced with her medication and waited for the girl to
Take it
pass
back, Shayna,
out.
for
While
she's a
she
negative
waited,
100.
she
Agree.
called the leasing center of the mobile home park and informed them that her suitcase had been stolen from her driveway. After a while, Sandra had passed out.
Ain't a
Melissa
face
took
on
the
this earth
metal
pretty
rolling
enough
pin
to make
and
up for that
sexually
shit.
assaulted the 8-year-old and then beat her with it. Melissa believed that she had killed the little girl, but she found that she was still breathing. She smothered her, then shoved her body into the suitcase. She
A
then
lot of
cleaned
people
the
gain
Sunday
weight in
school
jail.
classroom
A
and
lot
drove
of
to the
people do.
irrigation pond to dump the body, where she was seen by the veteran and his wife. Melissa pled guilty to Sandra's murder. but
Nexaro,
never
thank you
changed
so
her
much.
story,
For
never
resub, I
explaining
appreciate it
why
so
she
much.
felt
How are
compelled to
you?
kill her. She also refused to acknowledge the fact that she
A lot of
assaulted
people also
Sandra.
get very
She
fit
was
in
sentenced
jail.
to life without the
Stress weight, well,
possibility of parole.
there's
And without her
commissary, there's like
sentencing, she made this
eating
statement.
what other people don't eat. There's all kinds of ways that you can get extra calories in jail.
Badly I feel for the pain I have caused you. It is not enough that I say I'm sorry.
Oh, that
but that's all
sucks,
I can
James. I'm
do.
so sorry to hear that. Is she on that prison dating site? Maybe. Prison babes?
What I've done. For the rest of my life,
So
I'm going to
wild.
have to live with this.
Okay, so now we're doing
The
5.
responsibility for her death. Not a day, not an hour.
Can't
But
be real.
that I can think of the harm that I caused.
Well,
I
we're
love
doing
Sandra
it.
a great deal.
Trust in the source. Now it's really loud. Yeah, that's just the part of the video.
I alone are responsible for Sandra's death. I would like to apologize directly to you, Maria, for all the pain that I have caused you. I should not have taken Sandra from you. And I want you to know that she did not suffer and I did not sexually molest her daughter. I would also like to apologize to Sandra's extended family. I know that I have caused you a great deal of grief, but I am truly sorry.
God, how long is this part?
I
I just know that the second I turn it down, it's going to be quiet again.
For what I have put them through. I'm grateful that they have continued to stand by me. And I thank you for your unconditional love and support. I know how hard this has been for you as well, but you've continued to stand by me, and I can't tell you how much that means to me. But I'd also like to apologize to my own daughter, whom I've lost. I hope that someday you will forgive me. I love you a great deal, and I hope to see you again someday soon. I owe an apology to the people of Tracy, these officers who spent so much time looking for Sandra. I know that this has touched each of you personally, and for that I'm truly sorry. I know in my heart that God has forgiven me. I know my family has forgiven me. And I'm asking you, Maria, for your forgiveness.
It's not Oogie
I can't
Boogie.
imagine
It's not.
forgiving somebody who would harm my own daughter. But I hope that someday you can forgive me. Maria, I wish I could give you an explanation.
It's a plush
for
for
what
Bear
happened.
Taffy,
I owe
but
you
don't
an
tell him
explanation.
because it's a surprise.
I still cannot understand why I did what I did. Every day I try to discover my motivation, but I still do not have an answer. This is a question I will struggle with for the rest of my life. I wish that I could do more to help you. I wish I could bring Sandra back, but I can't. I wish I could trade places with her, but I can't do that either. I know that Sandra's death will continue to cause you pain. And I hope that this apology will help you in some way by accepting responsibility for what I have done. I
Yeah,
hope
weird
that I
how
can do
God
something.
can forgive all of these murderers. These like
To this day, there has been no motive given by Melissa as to
these
why she felt
horrible
the need to kill
murderers,
Sandra.
but
And even if she
gay
had,
people,
it
it's
wouldn't
no
make a
dice, I
difference.
guess.
Sandra was
Gay
a bright
people are
spark
going
and
straight to
deserved
hell.
to live the remainder of her life. But because of Melissa's sick need for attention, she felt justified in her actions.
I
And I
lost my
wish
count. I'm so
nothing but
sorry.
the worst for her. Thank you for watching this video. If you would like to see more true crime
Oh, shit.
content, consider subscribing. As I
Okay.
make new videos
Well, we're gonna
weekly.
pause
If there's
it,
a
and
case
it's
you would
time,
like
I
to
guess,
see me research
already
and report
for
on, let me know in the comments down below or email me at dreading.official.
Oh, this was the short one. Okay.
I hope you have a wonderful day, and remember to stay safe.
It's time for our commercial break. Everybody, make sure that you get your water if you need it, get a snack if you need it, get up and touch your toes if you're able. Just get your blood pumping, and we will be back in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. Don't go anywhere. Commercial button. Hi, it me. We back. How goes? Are y'all ready? Let's do this shit. Actually, I would like to see 3 readies. Please and thank you, if you don't mind. And then we'll keep going on this true crime adventure. Excellent, thank you.
If there is one singular thing that every
All right, so
person
this one is a
walking on
lot
this earth can
longer.
agree upon, is that they believe they are a
The
good
tragic
person,
demise
or at
of
least
Sylvia
they have been
Likens.
justified with everything they have done, even if they will
I don't think I've
acknowledge
ever heard of this
some
one before.
mistakes
Nice.
made along the way. As the only person to spend 100% of our time with ourselves, and the only one who can truly know everything we've gone through that has shaped us as individuals, each person sees things through a different
so
lens.
that was
The girl
11,
in
I
school
believe.
who often picked on her peers, insulting their appearance, their speech patterns, and various attributes, most certainly sees all of her actions as being reasonable or necessary. Perhaps that was simply how she learned to socialize with other women. Maybe she is mirroring how her mother talks to her, or possibly she just thinks how she behaves is funny and therefore okay. Same thing with the men who choose to use their strength to harm others, and so on. While we don't dedicate a lot of conscious thought into the matter, in our minds, we are the protagonist in every story. We
I
are
have to
the
be a
good
little
guy,
bit quiet 'cause
even
it
when we
sounds like
behave in negative ways,
my
and we
big
find
baboose
ways
is
to
recording
justify it to ourselves.
for YouTube.
That person we insulted to the point of tears had it coming. They started it, and so on and so forth. That's not to say that people can't have empathy for others and understand that what they did was wrong. Almost everyone can acknowledge fault in their actions and thinking and apologize for it. But the reality remains that no matter what we did, we will always view our actions as right and just at the time, and consider ourselves the protagonist in every scenario. Shockingly, the same is true in the case today, as each and every individual, witness, and participant in this case felt justified in their actions. Welcome
shit.
back to
Hold
another
on.
episode of Dreading,
This one goes
or if
into
this
the
is your
same.
first time
It's an
here,
increase.
welcome. Today we are going to be covering the case of Sylvia Likens and the abject
20.
terror she was put through at the hands of Gertrude Banaszewski and her family. This video has come highly requested for the past 2 months by multiple subscribers.
No, I agree with
particularly
you.
by Cecil McFly.
No,
and
I
hope to do
agree
the
with
case
you,
justice.
Sperry. I
That said,
think that both
due to
things
my
are true.
ongoing
Like,
health
the
issues,
choice that
this
you're
case was
making in the
compiled by a
moment feels
third
like the
party,
right
so if
choice
it all
to make
sounds
for the
different,
most
that is the
part.
reason. And as is the case for the majority of my videos,
And then when you find
YouTube's
out that it upsets
monetization has
somebody,
flagged
then
this
you
video
feel
as
guilty,
inappropriate
right?
and demonetized it. Thankfully,
Also, I
was able to
fucking
procure a
love
sponsor.
Cecil McFly.
One of the things that I pride myself with in regards to my content is my research. I personally make
I
an
love her
effort to
voice.
read and take in everything I have access to when it comes to a case. But sometimes there are things I am unable to
I watched
access
her,
due to my location. Which
Emily
is why before I
Artful
started this
Shanny
channel, I was a
Shenannies.
frequent user of today's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. A VPN stands for
I
Virtual
realize that I
Private
can't really
Network,
stand
which
her
means
content
it's a
because
shield
that's
for
like
your
really all
online
I've watched, but I
activity.
love her
Surfshark
voice.
provides a
Cecil
mask for your
McFly.
browsing, ensuring that people who want to steal your data and sell it to the highest bidder can't do so. It protects your
She's a
data from your
VTuber.
internet provider and hackers who are
1,
able to see what you're doing
I think she
even
just covers
incognito
YouTube
mode.
drama.
And it allows you to browse the internet safely and
2,
securely
3,
with their military-grade
4,
encryption.
5,
If you do most of your
7,
browsing on your
8,
phone, Surfshark is still
10,
able to protect you with their app, which
12,
provides the same
13,
level of quality
14,
protection and
16,
ensures
17,
everything you want to
18,
keep private
19, 20,
stays
21.
private.
Okay.
They are the only VPN to allow one account to be used on an unlimited number of devices, meaning that between your work computer, your phone, your laptop, or whatever, your browsing is protected. Besides it being necessary for any public browsing you might be doing, it also provides a way for you to travel the world
4.
from the comfort of your home. Surfshark has over 3,200 servers located all over the world, and with just a few clicks,
5.
you can go from Oklahoma to England, to Australia to Spain. Anywhere you can think of, you can go using Surfshark. I personally have used Surfshark when I'm researching various crimes, as it allows me to find news sources that are closer to where the crime happened, and have pieces of information
This totally
that weren't
worked out. I
widely
don't know
reported
why
on.
I am
Small
so
news
stupid
sites
today.
and
I do know
blogs
why
are
I am so
incredibly
stupid today. It's because
enlightening
I
and
slept
often
really
only
early.
get shown to me if I change my location to the general area of the crime. By changing my location, Google changes what it recommends to me, which allows me to create the most robust,
30.
fact-filled
Excellent.
videos that I can. I also use it to watch Netflix, because other countries have a bigger variety of content. Surfshark has partnered with me to provide my viewers with an incredible deal. You can use my code DREADING for 83% off, as well as 3 months
Josiah got a
entirely
sponsorship
free.
with
But if,
Surfshark
for
once,
some
and we got
reason,
to
you
use
don't like
Surfshark
it or
for a
aren't happy
while,
with the service, they
and it
also
was
provide
sick.
a 30
It
days
was a good
money-back
VPN.
guarantee, so you have nothing to lose.
It was
Go to
really user-friendly
surfshark.com
for
to
something
learn
that's,
more,
like,
or
a little
click the link in the
confusing
description to see what it's all about.
for people
I
who
want
don't
to give
know a lot
massive
about,
thank
like,
you
IT
to
stuff.
Surfshark for sponsoring my videos, because YouTube has been cracking down on them as of late. Being able to get a sponsor at all means I can continue to dedicate my time to this channel, and I am closer to my goal of
Okay,
doing
so
this
now
all
we
the
just
time.
do
So thank
30
you.
single
Again, if you're
crochets.
interested, click the link in the description below and use the code DREADING to get 83% off and 3 months completely free. With that being said, let us begin. Sylvia Marie Likens was born January 3rd, 1949, to parents Lester Cecil Likens and Betty Frances Likens. She was the third child.
Cecil was
to
my
the pair
grandpa's name?
and would be the only non-twin.
It's
in
so
her
funny that
family.
that just
She
came
was the
up
middle
again
child,
because
with 2 sets of
Cecil
fraternal
McFly
twin
spells
brothers
her
and
name
sisters flanking
like
her.
my
And
grandpa
as the only
Cecil
child
spelled
born as a singlet, she became
his.
increasingly independent.
It's wild.
According to some sources, Sylvia, who often went by the nickname Cookie, felt slightly excluded from the rest of the family. She believed everyone else
So I
was
thought it
paired
was
off,
Cecil
and that she
McFly.
was the odd man out. Of course, they were a family unit, and she knew that her family loved her.
Until I
but she
heard
couldn't
her
help
refer
feel
to
that
herself
everyone
in
else
the
was
video
born
as
with
Cecil.
a friend, and she was alone. In response to those circumstances, though, she was determined to become as independent and strong as she could. She wanted to be a pillar in her own life, never needing to rely on the kindness of others to succeed. She was competent and outspoken, always speaking out for herself and making sure
Is
that
that
she
true,
and those around
Sperry?
her were listened to. She would often defend her family, most notably her younger sister Jenny.
I never
who
really
suffered from
hopped
polio.
on the
Jenny was a year
Final
younger than
Fantasy
Sylvia and had to walk with a
train
leg brace
because
due to one of her
I
legs being
played
much
Legend
weaker
of
than the other
Dragoon and
one.
found it
Jenny
superior
was made
and
fun
was
of by
really
other
pissed that
kids
Final
her age
Fantasy was
due to
the
her
like
affliction
takeoff
and
hit.
obvious limp.
So
But
it was really
Sylvia
petty
often
of
stood
me
up
to
for her
never play
sister,
them. But to be
protecting
fair,
her
I
as
found
best
it
she
much,
could
much
from
more
the ridicule.
boring
In
than
one
Legend of
instance,
Dragoon.
she got into a physical altercation
liked
with a
Legend
larger
of
boy,
Dragoon a
all
lot
to protect
better
her sister's
than Final Fantasy
self-esteem
VII
and well-being.
in
Sylvia was
particular.
popular amongst people her age, and many regarded her as being beautiful, confident, and kind. Men her age would ask her out on a regular basis. However, she would reject them kindly,
Interesting, okay.
choosing instead
I
to
didn't
spend
know.
the bulk of her time with her younger sister and their friends. She was confident in her looks, but felt mild embarrassment at the fact that she was missing one of her front teeth, which had been kicked out when she was wrestling with her older brother when she was a child. Her sparkling personality and wit often afforded her opportunities to make money. She often worked as a babysitter, laundress, and ran errands for other people in her neighborhood for small bits of cash, which was desperately needed within her
Fuck
family.
Legend of Dragoon.
According to
Oh
many
no,
sources,
who's
Lester
trying to
and
fight
Betty
right
were not
now?
the most
Also,
active
hi
parents,
Batcave, how
as
are you? It's
Lester
so good
only
to
had
see
an 8th
you.
grade education. Neither he or Betty had planned to have as many children as they did, and
I
they had an extraordinarily hard
adore
time
you.
taking care of
Don't
their 5
even,
kids, which often
remotely
resulted in large arguments.
feel like
They
you
could
need to
barely
thank
afford to
me
take
for
care of
that,
themselves,
silly
much
goose.
less their offspring, which forced them to take whatever odd jobs were available at the time. Lester had worked a laundry route and worked in various industrial factories and even attempted to run his own restaurant at one point. However, none of his money-making ventures were ever successful. Betty had joined him on these jobs, always trying to help bring in more money for the family. But still, the couple would fall short regularly, leaving them in dire straits. Oftentimes, when things got bad, they would send their kids to stay with their relatives, with the promise to send money whenever they could, which was rare. However, in the summer of 1964, Lester and Betty were able to get a job that would change their family's financial situation.
Okay, we're gonna
They
start
were able
doing
to
the
travel with
switchbacks
a
in the
carnival
other
throughout the
direction
summer,
now.
selling food out of a concession cart during events. The job was easy enough on paper, seeing as it only required
And I
them
think
to
I
stay
might
on their
do
feet
double
all day,
crochets
and it
for
paid
it
well
so that
enough
it's
at the
bigger.
time. The only drawback was the fact that the carnival only traveled in the summer.
Were
and
you
the work could be
are you
physically
just
taxing.
big
The first
mad
summer the
because you
couple
can't do
spent with the carnival
additions?
was rough,
Is that
but
what's
Sylvia
up?
and her siblings were well
Kool-Aid?
taken care of at their grandparents' home. But the next summer was different. Sylvia's older sister, Diana, was already out of the house, having gotten married at 18 years old and moved in with her husband's family. That left Lester, Betty, her older brother Danny, Sylvia, Jenny, and Jenny's twin brother, Benny. Lester and Betty knew that to provide for the family, they would have to leave the home to work for the carnival again, and decided that their boys should join them to maximize
Sorry,
their earnings.
I did not mean
they
to
knew
pull
that Sylvia
out
could
of-
help as well, but due
I
to the demands
don't know
of
what
the
you're
job,
referring to.
Jenny wouldn't be able to
So
work with
in
them.
the
They
turn-based
likewise
combat,
felt
you
that
had to,
Sylvia
like,
and Jenny, as two beautiful young girls,
press
wouldn't be in a
the
safe position if they were
X
to travel
button
with the carnival,
in
as the majority
specific
of the
rhythms
workers
for
were
each
adult men.
attack.
Shockingly, as Lester and Betty
But
tried to
Koth, I've
find
been
someone
playing
to
Final
take care of
Fantasy
the
since
girls
SNES.
while
No,
they were
I fucking
away,
fully
on
get it.
July
I know.
3rd, Betty was
I
arrested
am
and
not gonna yuck
subsequently
your
jailed
yum.
for shoplifting. Betty was trying to provide for the family.
Not even
but
remotely.
due to
I
their low
understand
wages,
that,
couldn't afford to legally purchase any of the
that
items they
Final
needed.
Fantasy is
With the
a
knowledge
marvel
that their
of-
situation had gone from bad to worse, Lester
Honestly,
Likens
culture
hastily
and
arranged for his daughters
video
to
game
board
making,
with an
I think
acquaintance,
it is
Gertrude
fantastic, and I know that
Banaszewski.
just because
Gertrude
I
was the mother
prefer
of two girls
Legend of
with
Dragoon
whom
doesn't
Sylvia
mean
and
that,
Jenny
like,
had recently
Final
become
Fantasy is
acquainted
trash,
with at school.
right?
And due to their friendly relationship, Lester felt the
But I will
girls
fight
would be
you.
adequately
I will.
taken care of. Gertrude assured Lester she would care for his daughters until his return as if they were her own children, and Lester agreed to pay Gertrude
Anybody who
$20
doesn't
a
agree with
week.
me has
He had no way
trash
of knowing
opinions and
he
is a
had
piece of
condemned his
shit,
daughters
so.
to a house of terror.
Hi, Lillian. How are ya?
Gertrude Nadine Banaszewski was born in Indianapolis, Indiana on September 19, 1928. She was the third of 6 children and grew up in a middle-class family. Prior to Sylvia and Jenny Likens moving into her home in the summer of 1965, Gertrude had lived an incredibly difficult life. Growing up, Gertrude was her father's favorite. Her father doted on her whenever he could, which had the unintended consequence of leading to
I
her
love that
to
in
be
a
wildly
competent
disliked
series,
by her mother.
Kool-Aid.
Because of how she was favored by her father, her mother often neglected her and treated her horribly. She would take lengths not to hold Gertrude, and if her daughter was
What
put
a
in her
healthy
arms,
family
she would
dynamic.
purposely drop her. This led to the child being dropped on her head multiple times when she was just a kid, which has also been linked to brain damage and behavioral issues. Gertrude would rely on her father for companionship throughout her young life, and would avoid her mother at all costs. However, when she was just 10 years old, weeding the garden with her father, he would suddenly drop dead of a heart attack. Gertrude
Okay.
alerted her mother to the medical emergency, scared of what had happened to her parent. But her mother immediately blamed her and began screaming in the young
actually,
girl's
let's
face, "What did you do?" After her father's
undo
death, her mother's behavior towards
this
her
one.
only got worse. She blamed her daughter for her husband's passing, and often yelled at her over any perceived slight. This treatment didn't stop with just her mother. as
Sick,
her
Quinn.
siblings
I'll have
often
to look
joined
at
in,
that.
ridiculing her and treating her as if she was dirty and disgusting. Her sisters spread a rumor throughout their school that Gertrude was promiscuous and had multiple sexually transmitted diseases. Gertrude felt isolated and alone in the family home and was desperate for a way out. And when she was 16, she would find one, an 18-year-old police officer, John Stephen Banaszewski. However, after the wedding, she quickly found that John was even more volatile than her mother had been. John was incredibly abusive, both physically and mentally. Because of her poor relationship with her mother, Gertrude had never been taught how to do any of the things a wife was expected to do. She didn't know how to cook or clean, and the home was often left in a messy state. John felt, as it was common at the time, that it was her job to keep a good home, and when she failed to do so, he felt justified in
Crochet
punishing her.
and slut
He would
shaming
begin
and
striking her
ACAB?
often, or when he
I'm
found
not
the
a
home
slut
in a state of
shamer,
disrepair, or
even
when she had burnt the
remotely.
food. But these strikes soon
I
turned
love a
into
slut.
beatings for anything she did or said that he didn't like. And as they began
But I
growing
do
their
love
family,
Crochet
these beatings
and
would
ACAB.
usually be accompanied by him drinking excessively. 3 years
Oh,
after
the
they
video
married,
is?
the couple would welcome their first
I
daughter,
don't know.
Paula. And 2 years after that, they would have another daughter they named
I think that
Stephanie. For Gertrude,
that
motherhood didn't come
era
easily,
of
as she had
time
never
was
had
very
a loving and supportive
slut-shamey.
connection to her own mother, and had a general distrust of all other women stemming from the abuse from her sisters. She felt resentful towards them, and when she saw how other mothers responded to their daughters, she felt as if there was something very wrong within her. Shortly after Stephanie's birth, Gertrude had a nervous
Bless
breakdown.
CKD for
According
the
to
phrase
medical
"slut
records,
up" or
she
"shut
was
up."
diagnosed with neuroticism, which at the time was a catch-all term to describe mental, emotional, or physical reactions that appeared to be drastic.
I don't know,
and
guys. I
irrational. Because of the
kind of,
medical
I'm
system
regretting
and how
this
profoundly
double
little care was
crochet.
given to people's mental health and well-being
little
at the
bit.
time. Little
I kinda
care
wanna
was given
see
to
how it
Gertrude. She was told that she
does,
simply
though,
needed to work
here.
harder to be a good mom and pay more attention to their daughters. It is widely believed now in hindsight that Gertrude was suffering with bipolar disorder and borderline personality disorder. After her mental collapse, Gertrude tried to be as attentive as she could be to her daughter. She loathed her own mother and used her as a guideline of what not to do to her children. John continued to abuse her for any perceived failure.
In high school, I
and the
was a
couple
big-time
welcomed
slut-shamer
2
because I was
more
a
children,
pick-me.
John and Marie. However, as the primary
It was
caretaker
jealousy,
of 4
it
young
was,
children, Gertrude stopped paying attention to John.
Systematic
She had her hands full, and John began to
misogyny,
get jealous. The
it
beatings
was
began to get more violent, and finally, in 1955,
not
John
great.
and Gertrude would get a divorce.
Even though
Almost
I was
immediately,
promiscuous
Gertrude
myself,
would remarry,
I would very
this time
much.
to a man
I wasn't
named
promiscuous,
Edward
but like
Guntry. Edward viewed Gertrude
I
as a
definitely
meal
didn't
ticket,
have a lot of
given the
hang-ups
hefty
about
child
having
support
sex with
payments
boyfriends
John
and
was
stuff like
forced to
that,
give
right?
her. Edward didn't seem to like Gertrude much at all,
Or
much
like
less her
anybody that
children. And their
I
marriage
wanted
quickly
to.
fell apart 3 months
I don't know.
in,
I guess
after
by
Edward
some
hit
people's,
Stephanie in
by
the
like
face
trad
during
wife
an argument.
standards, 1
After
million
the demise of her
percent, I would
second
be
marriage,
categorized as
Gertrude was on her own for the
promiscuous. I
first
wouldn't
time
call
in her
myself
life.
promiscuous.
She tried to find
I didn't
men
cause
to
a lot
date
of
and
trouble
settle
by
down
fucking
with,
people
but they
or
regarded
anything.
her as old and past her prime.
But
felt as if her children
I
were
definitely, I was
unneeded baggage.
very
She
quick to
became
cast
lonely and
stones on
stressed,
other
and like so
girls who
many
behaved the
people
same
are
way.
off to do, she began to reminisce about her past with
It's bullshit.
rose-colored
I was a
glasses.
piece of shit.
Though John had been wildly abusive to her, she began to feel as if she had made a mistake divorcing him. He, at the very least, was a good father and never once struck the children or treated them unkindly, which she now viewed as a rarity. After a short while, she reunited with her ex-husband.
Oh shit,
and
I
they
was not
got
counting
remarried.
even
The pair
remotely.
went on to have 2 more children, Shirley and James.
3,
However, between the
4,
pregnancies,
5,
Gertrude
6,
would go
7,
on to have multiple
9,
late-term
10,
miscarriages.
11,
The shift in her
12.
hormones
So
and the
3
physical
more,
stress
and
her
we'll see how
body
this
was
goes.
going through took a toll on her mental well-being. And after each miscarriage, Gertrude became a shell of her former self. Taking care of herself was a daunting task, and instead, she would lay in bed unresponsive. Her
Quinn.
children would state that she seemed like a zombie, but no one, not even the doctors, knew how to help her. John, for his part, thought she was just being lazy and didn't
Poor
understand
Jean.
why she couldn't just get over the miscarriages the way he had. He would slap her in the face regularly, ordering her to get out of bed and take care of the children. But it was clear that something was incredibly wrong. In 1963, the couple would once again divorce due to John's abuse and Gertrude's waning mental health, leaving her responsible for 6 young children. Previously, she had been dedicated to righting the wrongs that were done to her by her mother and putting her kids' health and well-being above her own. But she quickly became embittered. She began to blame her children, most notably her daughters, for her lot in life and why she couldn't find a husband. She would give them impossible tasks to accomplish, so when they failed, she would beat them and call it punishment. As time wore on, Gertrude eventually found love again, albeit with an already married man named Dennis Lee Wright. Dennis was in his 20s, while Gertrude was in her 30s, and it was clear that he was using Gertrude for sex. However, she believed that he was her ticket out of poverty. She continuously pushed Dennis to leave his wife
There we go.
and be with her instead, but he refused. It wasn't until his wife found out about the affair on her own and left him herself that he would start a relationship with Gertrude. However, much like her other relationships, this one quickly became abusive. Much like with Edward,
Hi,
it was clear
Joshua.
that he didn't like Gertrude or really want to be with her. She just so happened to make herself available to him. Whenever he would try to leave, Gertrude would bribe him into staying with sex, hoping that after he finished, he would no longer remember why he had been angry in the first place. Eventually, their relationship resulted in Gertrude getting pregnant, which was something that Dennis was against. Though he was living with and taking care of her 6 children, he was adamant he didn't want any children of his own, and often told Gertrude this. He felt like children were a trap, and seeing how Gertrude was trying to make a living, being paid from John's child support, he felt justified in his reasoning. But Gertrude wanted nothing more than for him to marry her, and for them to have a child of their own. When Gertrude informed Dennis that she had gotten pregnant, he saw red. He began to beat her, first punching her in the face, then repeatedly socking her in the lower stomach, hoping to induce a miscarriage, which he was ultimately successful in doing. Despite the traumatic event, the couple stayed together, and Gertrude continued to try for another baby, deciding that if she were to get pregnant again, she'd simply keep it to herself until she was much farther along. Eventually, she would get pregnant again, and when she informed Dennis near the end of the pregnancy, he responded well. He didn't punch or attack her, and simply accepted the news calmly. This made Gertrude feel as though he had finally come around to being a father. However, the opposite was true. When Gertrude would come back to the shared home after giving birth to her 7th child, a boy who she named Dennis Lee Wright Jr., the home was completely empty. Dennis had moved out while she was giving birth, and ultimately refused to acknowledge the child or his parentage. When Gertrude later filed a paternity suit against him, demanding financial support for her son, Wright ignored it, stating that even if the child was named after him, it wasn't his. By 1965, she was living alone with her 7 children, whom she had begun to loathe. She had a deep-seated hatred and malice for other women, especially younger women, and saw her own children as being leeches who did nothing but take from her. They were the reason that she lost out on having a good life, and she felt nothing but resentment towards everyone she had to take care of. She had stopped taking care of herself, weighing only 100 pounds, and had begun to chain smoke. Her mental well-being was at an all-time low, and despite being in charge of 7 young lives, she couldn't be trusted on her own. Because of her mother's poor mental state, Paula, for all intents and purposes, took over as the primary caregiver for her brothers and sisters.
I'm gonna fucking use that as my sign-off.
Herself, she decided to take advantage of her mother's inability to take care of the
fucking
family
hilarious,
and turned their
Quinn.
home into a local teen hangout. Every day, boys and girls would fill the house to party, drink, and smoke leisurely, without worry of being caught by their parents. This had the unintended consequence of fueling Gertrude's ego, as the young men and women who would fill her house daily would compliment her, and say that she was so much cooler than their own parents. Gertrude found herself enjoying the praise, particularly when it came from her daughter's male friends, because it made her feel more desirable and appealing to them. They reminded her of when she was in high school, before she had settled down with John, and before, in her estimation, her life was ruined. Gertrude loved the positive attention so much that in one instance, she performed a striptease for one of the boys, a 14-year-old Richard Hobbs. This will become important later.
This is fucked
These
up.
would be the circumstances in which
Misogyny
Gertrude was left in
ruined
charge of
this
Sylvia
woman.
and Jenny, and she would go on to inflict an untold amount of terror on the girls.
I'm very good
As
at
previously
what?
mentioned,
Bat
Sylvia was a
cave?
beautiful, confident, and effervescent girl who seemed to draw everyone's eye. But to Gertrude, she represented everything that she hated. Gertrude resented the young girl, feeling as if it were unfair for her to not have to have gone through the same turmoil that she had gone through in her youth.
The
She
crochet,
reminded
thank you so
Gertrude
much.
of her
That's so
sisters,
nice.
who had told everyone she was promiscuous and had STDs, and her mother, who demeaned her every chance she got. Gertrude was bitter and angry at Sylvia from the moment she stepped into the home, and began to lash out at her immediately. She would belittle the 16-year-old, make snide comments and remarks about her appearance whenever she could, and she would treat her, as well as Jenny, with contempt. But it wasn't until 3 weeks into their stay, when their father's weekly $20 payment was late, that Gertrude unleashed the brunt of her anger onto the girls. In response to the missing payment, Gertrude began venting her frustration onto the girls, and began to beat them with whatever she had around her. She
I
hit
have
their
to
bare
count.
bottoms
Sorry, give me
with
1 second.
various
I'm gonna
instruments, striking
join
them
this
repeatedly
round
while
here.
screaming, "Well, I took care of you two little bitches for a week for nothing." As Gertrude struck the girls, Sylvia would try to defend her sister. She would demand that Gertrude hit her instead, as she was older and could take it. And Gertrude would force Jenny to watch as her older sister was beaten with paddles and other items. By
This is
August,
awful.
the girls had both been subjected to multiple severe beatings, and Gertrude's own children had begun to take part in the assaults by telling their mother about various fictional misdeeds that the girls had been doing in order to get her to hit them more. Gertrude, it seemed, had turned her kids against Sylvia and Jenny, the same way her own mother turned her siblings against her, although she didn't see it that way. On one occasion, Paula told her mother that Sylvia and Jenny had eaten an enormous amount of food at a church supper they had attended, and that the girls had engorged themselves, making it appear that they weren't properly being fed while staying at the house. Gertrude responded by beating them 15 times on the back
sick.
with a large wooden paddle, screaming at them throughout the assault. Sylvia tried to appease Gertrude by helping out around the house. She did various chores and cleaned up after the other children who were present, but it did little to garner favor from Gertrude. Instead, it seemed that Sylvia's helpfulness only served to irritate the older woman and make her even angrier at her. It seemed that no matter what she did, that Sylvia couldn't appease Gertrude, and even trying would make things worse. Taking after her mother, Paula became bitter towards Sylvia as well. She was 3 months pregnant at the time and had begun to put on a small amount of weight, leading to her feeling insecure about her own body. She felt as if the boys who came around the house had stopped paying attention to her and instead were focusing on her house guest. And this irritated her immensely. Like her mother, she began to seek out ways to torture the 16-year-old girl, with the idea that doing so would improve her self-worth. As the beatings became more and more severe, Gertrude would have Paula dish out the beatings towards Sylvia and Jenny, as her asthma and chain smoking had taken a toll on her body. Paula gladly took over, often hitting Sylvia in the back of the head repeatedly. On one occasion, Paula would injure herself by beating Sylvia, punching her in the face so hard that she broke her own wrist. She bragged about the accomplishment openly to multiple people who had previously been unaware of the beatings that were taking place. But still, no one stepped in to help the Lycan sisters. Paula would go on to use the cast as a weapon, often beating Sylvia with the plastered hand at the slightest provocation. At one point, she joked to her friends about how she had tried to kill Sylvia but had no such luck. Gertrude and Paula began to starve Sylvia, telling her she couldn't eat the meals they had made, unless there were some leftovers that had been put in the garbage. In order to
Jesus
satiate her own
Christ.
hunger, Sylvia and Jenny came up with a plan
See you
to
later,
earn their own
Lycan. Have a
money.
good one.
The sisters spent the next day at a park, collecting soda bottles, which they returned for a small amount of money. The sisters would end up using what little money they had received to buy a small amount of candy. Both girls ate their share of the candy, then they gave some to the other kids in the home. After finding it, Gertrude became enraged and beat Sylvia brutally, accusing her of stealing the candy outright. Paula and Gertrude obviously got a sick amount of pleasure from hurting the older Lycan sister and would resort to making up reasons as to why she deserved to be hit. On one occasion, Paula backhanded Sylvia across the face with her plaster cast because she had heard that Sylvia called Gertrude a bitch. No one had ever told her as much, and Sylvia denied ever saying it, but the idea that it could have happened was enough of a reason for Paula to act. Despite Sylvia already being starved and tortured by the two women, Gertrude began telling the teen that she was gaining weight and was clearly pregnant. Sylvia had talked about having a boyfriend in California, one who she had met in spring of that year. She was entirely sexually unexperienced, and when Gertrude inappropriately asked if she had ever done anything with him in front of a group of people, Sylvia said she had, then proceeded to talk about how they had done plenty of things, like go to the beach and roller skate. After this admittance, Gertrude started saying that Sylvia was pregnant and was gaining weight because of that. Sylvia took the comments in stride, as she hadn't been eating and knew she wasn't actually fat, and joked that she would probably have to start a diet. However, Gertrude wasn't joking and kicked Sylvia in the genitals. Later on, Paula would knock her off of a chair and shouted that, quote, "You ain't fit to sit in a chair." Gertrude and Paula would take to calling Sylvia a whore, saying that she has multiple sexually transmitted diseases and stated that she was sleeping with all the boys in the neighborhood. This mirrored exactly what Gertrude's own sisters and mother had done to her when she was younger. But again, Gertrude didn't seem to take note of the fact that she had turned into her own abusers. Gertrude and her daughters would tell everyone that they could that Sylvia slept with men for money, that she was a disease-ridden cow, and that she was most definitely pregnant. This resulted in many men trying to take advantage of Sylvia at school and in public, asking her how much it would cost to sleep with her and more. The abuse against Jenny had lessened, with both Paula and Gertrude focusing primarily on her older sister. She too was starved and tortured. Paula would force Jenny to hit her sister, and told Jenny that if she refused, she too would be beaten. Oftentimes, this would result in Sylvia encouraging the sister she protected throughout her life to hit her repeatedly as Jenny sobbed. On another occasion, Gertrude, Paula, and a boy from the neighborhood who had watched the abuse go on and found it entertaining, named Randy Lepper, decided it would be funny if they force-fed Sylvia a hot dog with absolutely every condiment on it. Though food was hard to come by in the Baniszewski household, using it as a means to torture Sylvia was always fair game. The trio ran around the kitchen, overloading the hot dog with everything they possibly could. They packed salt, pepper, and other spices on it, along with ketchup, mustard, mayonnaise, and relish, to the point to where the hot dog itself was no longer visible. They attempted to make the sausage as inedible as possible, thinking it would make Sylvia eating it funnier for them. After feeling content with their disgusting creation, the trio sat the starving girl down and told her to eat the hot dog. Sylvia said no, but Gertrude wouldn't take no for an answer. Gertrude, Paula, and Randy forced Sylvia's mouth open and pushed the hot dog into it. Gertrude forced the hot dog down Sylvia's throat with her fingers, causing Sylvia to throw up. Panting and crying, Sylvia had hoped the group had had enough of their torture. However, Gertrude then forced her face down into her own vomit and told her to eat it while they all watched. In July and August, Sylvia and Jenny would twice be visited by their parents, but neither informed them about the abuse. Both girls knew that their parents were struggling and that if they could have stayed elsewhere, they would have. Telling their parents that they were under duress would only hurt the family's finances, and at the time, they thought they could simply grin and bear it. Eventually, the parents would come home and the torture would be over, but unfortunately, Sylvia would never see that day. In an attempt to retaliate for the torrent of abuse she was facing, Sylvia started a rumor that Paula and Stephanie were prostitutes. When one man propositioned her for sex, she told him that she wasn't the girl in the house that sold her body. This rumor spread fast and resulted in Stephanie, like Sylvia had been before, being propositioned by other men. Stephanie was furious and demanded to know who told him that she was a prostitute, and he replied it was Sylvia. Later that day, Stephanie came home and screamed at the girl, asking her if she had in fact told people she had sex with men for money. Sylvia admitted to it while crying, and Stephanie punched her in response. After hitting Sylvia, Stephanie too broke down in tears, apologized, and the two girls made up. However, Stephanie's boyfriend, 15-year-old Coy Randolph Hubbard, would not let Sylvia get off as easily. He had been told about the rumor from a friend and flew into a rage. Coy came into the home and brutally attacked Likens and beat her more severely than Paula and Gertrude had been able to do. He slapped her in the face, beat her head against the wall, and flipped her backwards onto the ground, where she lay, bloodied and bruised. He then told Gertrude what had happened, and she too beat Sylvia once again using the paddle. After seeing the damage that Coy had been able to inflict upon Sylvia, Gertrude decided to involve the young men who would frequently come to the home in the abuse. They were stronger than both her and Paula, and moreover, they seemed to be willing to take things further than they could. She enjoyed their brutality and quick thinking, and so she would encourage any of the young men who visited her home to brutalize Sylvia for her entertainment. Coy and several of their classmates would begin to frequent the Baniszewski house in order to assault Sylvia. Under Gertrude's supervision and encouragement, the children would routinely beat and assault Sylvia. Some boys took to using her as a practice dummy when they practiced judo. Others would spend time cutting various parts of her body, being mindful not to cut too deeply so she would need medical attention. When they would smoke, Gertrude and the teens would put their cigarettes out on Sylvia's naked skin, leaving her with over 100 burn marks. Sylvia would eventually attempt to seek help from her older sister Diana. Jenny and her met up with Diana twice while staying at the Baniszewskis, and both girls detailed the horrific abuse they were under. They recounted everything that Gertrude, Paula, and the neighborhood boys had done. However, Diana didn't believe them. She thought that what they were detailing was far too horrific to be true, and in her mind, no one person, let alone a whole band of people, would allow for her sisters to be treated like this. She would later attest to the fact that she believed that they were exaggerating the abuse for attention, and ignored their plea for help. However, several weeks prior to them informing her about the abuse, they had seen each other in the same park, and Diana had purchased Sylvia a sandwich when she stated she was hungry. Marie Baniszewski had been in the area and witnessed the exchange, and would bring this up to her mother in September. Like everything else the 16-year-old did, this angered Gertrude, who screamed at Sylvia for her perceived gluttony. She choked her, forced her fingers down her throat to get her to throw up the sandwich that had been eaten months earlier, and bludgeoned her. Gertrude then became resolute that in order to cleanse Sylvia of her sinful ways, she would need to be given a scalding hot bath. Jesus fucking tap dancing Christ. Gertrude and Paula stripped Likens and forced her into the near boiling water, and brutally scrubbed her body. The pain was so immense that it caused Sylvia to pass out multiple times, but every time she did, Gertrude would grab her by her hair and bang her head against the tub until she woke up. Worse still, Gertrude forced Sylvia to strip naked in front of a large group of teens, including her younger sister, and masturbate using a glass bottle.
Oh my God!
Because Sylvia had been rifling through the neighbor's trash looking for food to eat. Sylvia was a virgin and had no clue how to do what Gertrude was asking of her, which led to Gertrude forcibly smacking the glass bottle until it couldn't go any further inside of the girl. According to all that were present on that day, Gertrude taunted Sylvia
This is the
while
worst
she was
one.
doing this, telling her to show Jenny what kind of girl she really was. The group of boys present yelled their own taunts at Sylvia, which alerted Stephanie to what was going on. When she came out of her room and found her mother forcing Sylvia to do this, she slapped Sylvia in the face and ordered her to go upstairs. Sylvia tried to remove the bottle from her vagina, but was unable. Gertrude, annoyed, harshly pulled out the bottle and found that it had been filled with blood. This instance, along with Gertrude and Paula constantly kicking Sylvia's genitals, led to her vagina being brutally injured, but worse still was yet to come. Eventually, the abuse was so bad that Sylvia was taken out of school to avoid suspicion. School had functioned as her only respite, but now every minute of the day she was under the watchful eye of Gertrude, who was now obsessed with hurting the girl in new ways. Stephanie tried to step in at one point, but she stopped protesting when she realized her mother's abuse could easily be turned on her. She was seemingly the only person in the house who took issue with what was going on, but felt powerless to stop it. Anyone who came by the home looking for Sylvia was told various lies by Gertrude and Paula. To authorities, Gertrude would state that Sylvia ran away with a group of young men, and that she was an out-of-control little slut who was a bad influence on everyone around her. To any friends from school that knew Sylvia, she told them various lies, with the hopes that they would hate the 16-year-old and want to hurt her. In one instance, this tactic worked, with Gertrude telling one of Sylvia's school friends, Anna Cisco, that Sylvia had informed her that Anna's mother goes out with men for $5. This enraged Anna, and when Sylvia eventually saw her friend, she was attacked, as Gertrude gleefully watched on. When out of school, Gertrude burnt Sylvia's fingertips with matches and whipped her with a belt. The abuse continued to escalate until the father of one of the neighborhood boys, Michael Monroe, called the school to inquire about a girl with open sores across her body living in the Baniszewski household. As a direct result of her starvation, Sylvia's wounds were no longer healing properly, if at all. In response, the school sent a nurse over to the Baniszewski home to check on Sylvia and see what condition she was in. The nurse would never see her. When she arrived at the home, Gertrude informed them that Sylvia had been staying there, but she ran away the previous week with a gaggle of men. She went on to say that Sylvia was a bad influence on their daughters, was constantly having sex with various men, and had picked up multiple different diseases from her wild escapades. She went further to claim that she had absolutely no idea where the girl was, despite her being the legal guardian, and added that Likens was, quote, out of control. and that her open sores were a result of Lycan's refusal to maintain decent personal hygiene. After hearing Gertrude's outlandish tale, the nurse left the home, and the school would close the book on Sylvia's well-being. Shortly after this instance, in October of 1965,
You don't think that an adult
Lester and
speaking
Betty
about a
returned to
child
visit
that
their
way
daughters.
would,
They
like,
were set to return permanently in
set
3
off
weeks,
alarms?
but wanted to check on the girls to make sure they were okay. On this trip, neither Sylvia or Jenny mentioned
It's a
the
lot,
abuse,
Sperry.
but
Yeah, I
Sylvia
can
looked
understand if you
haggard.
can't handle
She
it,
did
like
what she
1
could to
million
cover up the
%.
bruises and wounds on her arms and legs, but she was frail and sickly. Again, the girls didn't want to worry their parents, and still, they feared that even if they told them, nothing would be done. They had taken a leap of faith when they told their older sister, but she hadn't believed them. They worried that if they told their parents, and they didn't believe their story, they would tell Gertrude and the abuse would continue to get worse. Sylvia thought that as bad as everything was, it was almost over. Sadly, neither Betty nor Lester seemed to notice anything wrong with their daughters, and after taking them out for sodas, they left them in the care of Gertrude once more. Dude, how the fuck would you not notice any of this
Agree.
shit? Alright, anyways. Shortly after the visit from her parents, Sylvia became incontinent due to the repeated abuse of her genitals. Gertrude and Paula would revel in her humiliation, refusing to let the girl use their bathroom and watching as she wet herself. Despite them being the direct cause, they still felt the need to punish Sylvia, and in response to her repeated accidents, Gertrude threw the 16-year-old in the basement and tied her up.
I don't
Gertrude
understand
took her
how
clothing,
Gertrude, like
stating
how
that
this has
Sylvia would
anything to
ruin
do
it
with the
if she
spiel
kept
in the
it,
beginning
and
about how
deprived the
everybody
girl
is a
of food and
protagonist. You
water.
don't do
For
this
added
kind of torture
humiliation,
to a human
Gertrude would
being
tie
and
her
not know
arms
that you
above her
are
head
the
on the
bad guy.
staircase railing, stretching her body until her feet were barely touching the ground.
People
She
who
would
think
leave
they're in the
Sylvia
wrong don't
hanging
hide
there for hours on end,
their
deprived of any
abuse.
food or water. The horrors
They
were
say it
far
out
from
loud.
over, though. Seeing how happy abusing Sylvia made the neighborhood kids, Gertrude decided to start charging them to abuse her. For 5 cents, Gertrude would allow anyone who wanted to see the display of Sylvia and have their way with her. If they wanted to burn, beat, cut, mutilate, or defecate on her, it was encouraged, and multiple young men and women paid for the privilege. If Sylvia soiled herself, Gertrude and whoever was around would gag and restrain her before carrying her upstairs for another scolding bath. Only this time they started to literally rub salt into her wounds until she passed out from the pain. In one instance, Gertrude's 12-year-old son, John Jr., rubbed the contents of her 1-year-old son, Dennis Jr.'s diaper into Lycan's face and forced her to eat it. He also delighted in tormenting her by offering her food and taking it away quickly, as her reflexes had slowed incredibly. Following another instance of her wetting
This is
herself,
wild.
Sylvia was once again forced to insert a glass bottle into her vagina in front of a large group of people. When Gertrude was satisfied that the girl had been embarrassed enough, she sent her back down to the basement. However, when she went into the kitchen, she was struck with her most horrific idea. She called Lycans into the kitchen and ordered her to strip naked once again. According to those present, she stated, "You have branded my daughters, now I'm going to brand you." She instructed those who were present, including 14-year-old Richard Hobbs, the child she had done a fucking striptease for, and her 10-year-old daughter, Shirley, to hold Sylvia down as they carved the words, "I'm a prostitute and proud of it," into her stomach with a heated needle. Sylvia was too malnourished and weak to
Cool.
fight back, and when Gertrude got tired midway through, she asked Richard Dean Hobbs to finish the inscription for her, which he gladly did. Gertrude left the home while this was happening to get some groceries, and Richard would later say that what he did wasn't that bad because, quote, he made sure his etchings were short and light, so they wouldn't hurt her as much. After finishing the inscription, Shirley and Richard took Sylvia to the basement where they tried to brand her again, this time with the letter S for Sylvia under her left breast. However, they applied the letter backwards and it more closely resembled a 3. When Gertrude returned from the store, she went to the basement and taunted Sylvia, who was in a zombie-like state. She said, "Sylvia, what are you going to do now? You can't get married now. What are you going to do?" To which Sylvia replied, "I guess there's nothing I can do." That night, Sylvia was able to talk to her sister privately for the first time in a while, and told her that she believed she was going to die soon. Jenny tried to tell her to hold on, and that things would be okay, but Sylvia knew better. She could barely walk by herself, and her body was no longer healing, and some of the torture they'd inflicted on her no longer hurt. She knew her body was too weak to go on, and within the next couple of days, she would be dead. At this point, Gertrude seemed to realize that Sylvia wouldn't be able to go back to her family. She, like the Lycan sisters, was well aware that in the coming weeks, their parents would be back to pick them up, and eventually, they would see the catastrophic damage that had been done to their daughter. Worse still was that if Sylvia was to tell anyone what had happened, she had the proof burned into her body, and there were plenty of adult witnesses who had seen what she had done and not stepped in. In one instance, Sylvia was seen by a couple rummaging through their garbage looking for food, but they hadn't alerted the authorities. Gertrude's next-door neighbors, the Vermillions, had talked to Sylvia twice, and each time they saw her, she was more battered than the time before. Gertrude had readily admitted that she was the one who brutalized the girl, but neither of them cared beyond deciding not to allow her to look after their own children. Then there was the school nurse, and so on. Should Sylvia state that it was Gertrude who attacked her, she knew she would be found guilty. Instead of getting the girl any sort of medical help or feeding her properly, Gertrude came up with a foolproof plan to make sure Sylvia would disappear forever and pin all of the abuse on a group of fictional young men. She forced Sylvia to write the following letter to Mr. and Mrs. Likens. I went with a gang of boys in the middle of the night, and they said they would pay me if I would give them something, so I got in their car, and they all got what they wanted. And then they got finished, they beat me up, and left sores on my face and all over my body. And they also put on my stomach, I am a prostitute and proud of it. I have done just about everything that I could to make Gertie mad, and cause Gertie more money than she's got. I tore up a new mattress and peed on it. I have also cost Gertie doctor bills that she really can't pay, and made Gertie a nervous wreck and all her kids. I cost her $35 for a hospital in one day, and I wouldn't do nothing around the house. I've done anything to do things, to make things out of the way to make things worse for them. The letter was meant to make Sylvia look bad, and paint Gertrude as nothing but a warm, loving woman who took care of Sylvia as best she could. Although the story it was trying to sell would fall apart quickly. Why would Sylvia write a letter to her parents and address it to Mr. and Mrs. Likens? Why, as she lay dying, would she feel the need to write this letter? And why would she choose to only implicate herself in the letter and not the men who did this to her? The second part of Gertrude's plan was up in the air, as part of her wanted to keep the girl alive, so that she could continue to abuse her with her prepubescent friends.
As smart as they are, kind, exactly.
The other part of her knew that it would be better for Sylvia to die. In order to kill the girl, she planned to have John Jr. and Jenny blindfold her and lead her into the woods nearby, where she would succumb to the elements. After writing the letter, Sylvia would be tied to the stair railing once more, and Gertrude would offer her a few small crackers to eat. But Sylvia was past the point of hunger. She knew she was going to die, and felt as if food would only be used to prolong her suffering. She told Gertrude to give the food to their dog, but Gertrude instead forced the crackers into the girl's mouth before beating her once again. Later that day, Sylvia awoke to hear Gertrude talk to her son about her plan to kill Sylvia, and tried to fight for her life. She weakly attempted to leave the home, but due to her extensive injuries, malnourishment, severe dehydration, and general weakness, Gertrude would catch her before she would be able to leave the home. In retaliation, Gertrude struck Sylvia so hard with a curtain rod that she bent the metal into a near-perfect right angle. Coy Hubbard was present and took a turn beating Sylvia with the rod until she was fully unconscious. They then dragged the girl into the basement.
Sleep Ninja,
night,
this one
Sylvia
is
once again tried to get herself help. She screamed as loud as she could, hoping beyond reason that someone would call the police or try to help her, but no one did.
Everybody failed.
By the morning
this
of October
poor
26th,
little girl.
Likens was unable to either speak intelligibly or correctly coordinate the movement of her limbs. Gertrude moved the emaciated teen into the kitchen and, having propped her back against the wall where she attempted to feed her a donut and a glass of milk. Sylvia was too far gone at that point and could barely move by herself, which annoyed the older woman. She threw Likens to the floor in frustration when Likens was unable to correctly move the glass of milk to her lips, and then threw her back down into the basement. Shortly thereafter, Likens became delirious, and couldn't properly speak. When Paula asked her to recite the English alphabet, Likens was unable to recite anything beyond the first 4 letters or to raise herself off the ground. The repeated beatings she had taken and multiple concussions she had suffered at their hands was beginning to show, and the result was terrifying. Paula verbally threatened her, hoping that Sylvia was faking her inability to talk and that the threat of violence would get her to comply. But still, Sylvia sat in her stupor until she defecated on herself. In an attempt to wash Likens, a laughing John Banaszowski Jr. sprayed her with a garden hose brought to the house that afternoon at Gertrude's request. Likens again desperately attempted to exit the basement but collapsed before she could reach the stairs, both due to the water and her weak state. As she lay on the ground, weak and wet, Gertrude stamped upon Likens' head before standing and then staring at her for several moments. Shortly after 5:30 p.m., Richard Hobbs returned to the Banaszewski residence and immediately proceeded to the basement. He slipped on the wet basement stairs and fell heavily to the floor of the basement to be confronted with the sight of Stephanie crying and cuddling Likens' emaciated and lacerated body after she had been ordered by her mother to clean Sylvia. Stephanie and Richard decided to give Likens a warm, soapy bath and dressed her in new clothes. They then laid her upon a mattress in one of the bedrooms as Sylvia muttered her final wish that her daddy was here. When Stephanie realized that Likens was not breathing, she attempted to apply mouth-to-mouth resuscitation as Gertrude repeatedly shouted to the children in the house that Sylvia was faking her death. Gertrude threw herself on the girl's dead body and began to beat her with a book while screaming "faker" over and over again. After this assault didn't rouse the girl, the older woman realized that she was dead, and she, along with the entire neighborhood, had killed Sylvia. She began to panic and instructed Richard to call the police from a nearby payphone. She kept Jenny close to her and told her to go along with her story, lest she end up like her sister. She then would put on the performance of a lifetime.
God,
when the
this
police
is
would arrive
so
to the home at
sick.
6:30 p.m., Gertrude would answer the door, feigning distress. She went on to tell the police
Why
that
do
she
they
had been
always
in charge of taking care of Sylvia
do
and
that?
her sister while their parents were away.
Like,
But Sylvia had proved to be too much to handle. She stated
if
that
you
she
murder
tried to run
somebody,
away
you're not
on
gonna get away with
multiple
it.
occasions
Like,
with various men.
not if
had
you
sex with
are
multiple
wrapped up in their
partners, and that
lives.
earlier that day, she had arrived back on her doorstep, brutalized and naked, clutching the letter to her chest. She brought the police through her home to the room that Sylvia lay dead on, with the soiled mattress, and handed them the letter she had forced her to write
Gertrude is
the
like
day
a curse
before.
name.
She said that by the time Sylvia had arrived to the home, she was already
Definitely a
dying,
cursed
and
person.
Gertrude had spent the previous hour trying to tend to her wounds and take care of her. The story was far-fetched to say the least, as the scene was grisly. Sylvia was beyond battered. Her body was emaciated, and it was apparent that something terrible had occurred there. But more than that, the mattress that she was lying on had multiple stains on it, at various stages of drying, meaning that she would have had to have been on it for a while. While police surveyed the scene, Paula entered the room, holding a Bible to her chest in an attempt to look saintly, and told Jenny that Sylvia's death was meant to happen, as God doesn't make mistakes, and that, quote, "If you want to live with us, Jenny, we'll treat you like our own sister." Jenny was terrified. Over the space of 3 months, she had watched nearly everyone she knew abuse and torture her protector, and she was forced to participate. And when she reached out for help, she wasn't believed. And if word got back to Gertrude, she knew she would be tormented even more. But more than that, she knew that if she stayed in the home, she would be next. The police talked to Jenny with Gertrude right next to her, and she parroted what the older woman had told her to say. However, while the officers continued to take in the scene, Jenny was able to get one of them alone, and told them, "You get me out of here, and I'll tell you everything." Jenny was taken to the station, and there she told them everything she had witnessed. She told them how Gertrude had beaten her sister to a pulp and forced her to stick various objects in her vagina. She told her how the older woman forced her to participate in the beating, and how her sister encouraged her to hit her harder to keep her from being brutalized. And she told them how Paula had punched Sylvia so hard in the face she broke her hand, and she gave them the names of every single neighborhood kid who took part in the assaults. The autopsy was done the same day, and it was found that Sylvia suffered an excess of 150 wounds on her body. That said, the exact number of injuries is likely much higher, given the fact that many of the wounds would overlap, and it was unclear how many times she had been stabbed, burned, or otherwise injured. At the time of death, she was suffering from extensive muscle and nerve damage, and her vaginal cavity had swollen shut from
Muscle
continued
and
abuse.
nerve
Her fingernails
damage.
were broken backwards, and most of the skin on her face, neck, breast, and knees had receded. It also appeared that in her final moments, she had bitten fully through her lips, severing portions of her face. The autopsy found that the ultimate cause of death for Sylvia had been a severe blow to her right temple, most likely done by Coy Hubbard. Jenny's statement alone was enough for the police to arrest Gertrude, Paula, Stephanie, and John Jr. on suspicion of murder hours after the body was reported to police. Later on that same day, Coy and Richard would also be arrested for the same offenses. The sheer brutality of what had happened had shocked all those who heard about it, and police were even more shocked to find that the majority of people who took part in the routine beatings of this young girl were so young themselves that they couldn't be legally placed in a juvenile detention center. How could these seemingly good, normal kids have taken part in this? What had really gone on in the home? The story quickly blew up in the media, and people became
If this is
enamored
what humans
with the
are
crime,
capable of,
unfortunately
humans
forgetting
don't
the victim in the story. Sylvia
deserve
Likens
to
was a
be
wonderful
here.
girl who had a bright future. She sacrificed herself for her sister's well-being, and she was an incredibly strong individual. The fact that she is known mostly for the way that she died, and not the way she lived, is a tragedy, one that falls squarely on the shoulders of the monsters who did this to her. As word spread about the event, Richard Hobbs was interviewed by WIBC News Radio about his participation in the abuse and said this.
Right, Quinn? Yeah.
By the time the case went to trial, only 5 people were charged with causing Sylvia's death, that being Gertrude, Paula, John Banaszewski, Coy Hubbard, and Richard Hobbs. However, plenty of people both happily witnessed and took part in the abuse, many of which would be placed on the stand to testify. As the story began to gain wide attention and horrify the nation,
I wonder if
Gertrude
she gets the
maintained her
death
innocence,
penalty.
pleading both not guilty and not guilty by reason of insanity. When asked what had occurred, Gertrude would begin to cry, repeating that she didn't know.
I
and that she
agree,
hadn't
Quinn.
been in
It's
her
just
right
hard to
mind
feel
for a
that way
long
when
time
listening to some of
leading
these
up to the
stories.
events.
You're
She
totally
pointed to her
right.
long-standing mental health issues, as well as her multiple miscarriages, as proof that she wasn't well. Her lawyers claimed that she had absolutely no idea what was going on in her home, and that if anything had happened, it had happened without her knowledge. She claimed that the teens who were in her home day and night had free domain, and it was ridiculous to think that she would have been able to control all of them. In her own words, her home had turned into a madhouse, and she was much too depressed to control the children. She also expressed that her daughter, Paula, had become the head of the household, and if there was anyone to blame, it was her. She was the one who had let all the teens in, she was the one who was in charge, so she was the one they should blame. Paula, too, maintained her innocence, and seemed largely unaffected by the situation. She came across as cold and callous, smirking in her mugshot and telling a psychiatrist that Sylvia had been to blame for the abuse she suffered. According to the psychiatric evaluation, she, Paula, represented the situation as one in which the girl Sylvia had become quite withdrawn and negativistic in her behavior to the extent that she refused to eat and showed no response to pain. When talking about the violent beatings she would give the 16-year-old, Paula would smirk and laugh, finding the memory of the event funny, and when scolded, she would roll her eyes.
Jesus.
Stephanie testified against her family, and while in court, talked about how Paula had struck Sylvia so hard that she broke her wrist, then detailed how she would use the plaster cast as a weapon against her. Her testimony was corroborated by another young girl, Grace Sargent, who stated that she often sat next to Paula on the church bus and heard her boasting about how hard she hit Sylvia multiple times. According to Grace, Paula had stated that she tried to kill Sylvia. Randy Lepper, another young boy who asked to recount what he saw in the house leading up to Sylvia's death, went into detail about the time Gertrude had forced Sylvia to undress in front of a large group of the neighborhood boys. While on the stand, he smirked and laughed, recounting how he hit Likens on over 10 occasions
Why
at
would
Gertrude
they
and
laugh
Paula's
on the
request,
stand?
because everyone else was doing it. But worse still, Roy Julian, a Baptist minister in the area, took the stand and testified to knowing that Sylvia was being abused in the home. When asked why he didn't go to the authorities or do anything to help her, he said that Gertrude had informed him that Sylvia, quote, made advances on men for money and was a prostitute. She claimed that the torture that she and the neighborhood children were inflicting on her was punishment for her sins, and therefore it was okay. The story was parroted by the Vermillions and other adults in the area that saw what Gertrude and the kids were doing. Gertrude would tell them that the girl somehow was deserving of the abuse, and instead of looking any further into it, they all decided it was none of their business. After 8 hours of deliberation, Gertrude was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life. Her daughter Paula was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to life alongside her mother, and her son, John Jr., alongside Coy and Richard, were found guilty of manslaughter, to which they were sentenced 2 to 21 years in prison. However, that's not where the story ends. September 1970, the Indiana Supreme Court reversed the convictions of Gertrude and Paula Paniszewski on the basis that Judge Saul Isaac Rabb had denied repeatedly submitted motions by their defense counsel at their original trial for both a change of venue and separate trials, and immediately Paula opted to plead guilty to voluntary manslaughter. She was then sentenced to serve a term between 2 and 20 years, despite twice unsuccessfully having attempted to escape from prison in 1971. She was released in December 1972, meaning she served less than 10 years for her role in the murder of Sylvia. After being released from prison, Paula changed her name and assumed an entirely new identity. And disturbingly, under the new identity, she started working as a school counselor's aide at the Bowman Conrad Liscombe Union Whitney Community School in Conrad, Iowa. Paula had forged documents under this new identity and used said documents to hide her criminal background. However, after 14 years of employment, her real identity was revealed and she was promptly fired. Gertrude was once again found guilty for Sylvia's murder and was sentenced to serve life in prison once more. However, she would be released from prison in 1985, 20 years after murdering the 16-year-old. She changed her name in the prison to Nadine Van Fossen and moved to Iowa, where she lived in relative obscurity until her death in 1990 from lung cancer. Richard Hobbs, Coy Hubbard, and John Paniszewski Jr. all served less than 2 years in the Indiana Reformatory before being granted parole on February 27, 1968. Less than 4 years after his release, Richard Hobbs died of lung cancer. Coy Hubbard would go on to be imprisoned for various other offenses throughout his life, before dying at the age of 56 of a heart attack. John Jr. would change his name to John Blake and became a lay minister, where he mostly counseled children of divorced parents. He too would die at the age of 52 in 2005 from diabetes. Prior to his death, he would admit that he enjoyed being linked to Sylvia's murder, as it brought him a fair amount of attention, and claimed he only ever hit her once. Though technically, all those involved with the crime were sentenced and Sylvia got justice, the ending of this case feels uneasy. So many people knew it was happening and did nothing to stop it. Gertrude's neighbors witnessed many atrocities. They heard the screams and saw the wounds and still said nothing until it was too late. Most of the kids who beat Sylvia, cut her, and humiliated her went free and laughed about everything they had done, and nothing in this story feels finished. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked our coverage, hit the like button and subscribe. If there's a true crime case you would like to see us cover in the future,
I was
leave
just
it in the
recently
comments
made
below,
very,
or email me
very
at
aware of that,
@gmail.com.
Quinn.
Have a wonderful day, and remember
And I stand
to
by
stay
what I
safe.
said. In anger.
David Russell Williams enrolled in the Royal Canadian Air Force in 1980.
Okay, guys. Oh my goodness, crazy like a fox. I feel so bad. It's time to call the stream right now. Like I have to be done. But thank you so much for the 5 gifted subs. I will be back tomorrow. That one was brutal. I can't do anymore. We'll be back tomorrow and maybe we will find something else. We should take a break from true crime, I think. I am too sensitive. I can't believe the display of some people's cruelty and the fact that they were laughing on the stand. That was wow. Anyway, we'll be back tomorrow. But we might do true crime, but I'm gonna maybe vet the cases because I don't want to do another one that rough. But we're looking pretty good here. So far, this is exactly the shape that I've been wanting. So that's nice. I don't know if you guys can see the full thing. It's got a good S going to it. That's true, Quinn. Maybe we should do that. Yeah, let's definitely do that. Let's do Night Mind tomorrow. We'll do Night Mind tomorrow. We'll I'll link all of the features and stuff in the bot. That's a good idea. No, it is not a cocksock. It's the bottom of a ghost plushie. I'm pleased with how it's coming out. I'm pleased with how it's coming out for sure. Anyway, I gotta call it. There's no way. I'm gonna run a commercial. Just so you guys know, Josiah recently got picked up by Into the AM. He has an affiliate link on his Twitter if you are interested in that. He also has a Patreon going. That's the ways. Oh, and we both have throne lists. Those are the ways that you guys can support us outside of the stream if you feel like it. If not, no big deal. Thank you so much for watching. Yeah, I'm gonna go. That was a lot. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for sticking around through commercials.